What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now, clearly here these phones are in slightly different price classes, but if you're looking for a new phone and you're trying to decide whether to get something a bit higher end like the S21 FE, or get something a bit lower end and more affordable like the A24 4G, this comparison is going to give you a better idea of what to expect from these phones. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the A24 4G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. With the S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display. This phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 411, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio as well. So in general, these displays are pretty similar. On one hand, the A24 is slightly larger, at again 6.5 inches versus 6.4. And on the other hand, the S21 FE with a dynamic AMOLED has a slightly more premium looking display, but honestly, when it comes to image quality, they're pretty much the same in my opinion. And in general, they both are really good. So if you're consuming a lot of content, whether you're doing stuff like reading or watching videos or something like that, where the image quality is a bit more important, regardless, if you are looking for a phone that has a really great display, either phone here will be a great choice. Now for storage, both phones are getting 128GB of internal storage, but keep in mind, the A24 4G does have microSD card expansion, whereas with the S21 FE, this phone does not have microSD card expansion, but it does have another variant with 256GB. So if you do want more storage with this phone, you can technically get it. So in general, I feel like this really comes down to whether or not you want microSD card expansion, because on one hand, it can be useful, especially if you have lots of photos and videos, but on the other hand, I feel like 128GB is plenty of storage for most people anyway. So I feel like for the average user, when it comes to storage, you really won't go wrong with either phone here. For security features, like pretty much every Samsung phone, both phones have Face Unlock and they both have fingerprint scanners. With the A24, it's right here on the power key, and with the S21 FE, it's in the display. So a bit more of a premium look. But starting with the A24, let's give them a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. And now for the S21 FE. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well. No issues at all. And again, remember, both phones have Face Unlock too, so definitely nice to get both options. Now taking a look at the camera setups here. With the A24, up front, we get a 13-megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 50-megapixel main camera, a 5-megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 2-megapixel macro camera. And then for video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so no 4K here. With the S21 FE, up front, we get a 32-megapixel selfie camera. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 12-megapixel main camera, an 8-megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12-megapixel ultra-wide camera. And then for video, this phone can record 4K videos in both the rear and front, so definitely keep this in mind if you're recording a lot of videos. In general, I feel like the camera setups are pretty similar, but the S21 FE is definitely a step up. Despite not having a macro camera, I feel like, in general, the telephoto lens is a lot more useful. And in addition to this, keep in mind, despite having a 12-megapixel camera as opposed to 50, the S21 FE does still have a much higher end sensor. So in general, despite not having as many megapixels, the photo quality with this phone will be significantly better. But that being said, the A24 does have a really good setup too, so honestly, depending on what each phone costs wherever you're at, because I know it does vary from region to region, but considering the S21 FE is typically a bit more expensive, I feel like for most people, you probably don't really need camera quality this good. I mean, it is nice to have, but if you're spending maybe like $600 or $700 on this phone and you're not really using the camera all the time, I feel like the A24 will be perfectly fine anyway. But of course, if taking photos is really one of the main things you're doing, then the S21 FE could be worth the extra money. But like I said before, depending on where you're at, the S21 FE might not actually be that much more expensive. For example, in the US, you can get this phone unlocked on Amazon for really not that much money. I think it was going for around 3 something last time I looked, and it could be even less now, especially considering the S23 FE is coming out pretty soon. So in general, despite the A24 4G going for around $185 factory unlocked, which I personally consider pretty affordable. If you can get the S21 FE for really not that much more, you might want to go with the S21 FE anyway. But I know it's not like this in every country, so you could be in an area where the S21 FE is like double or triple the price. So in that case, if you're not really taking a lot of pictures, the difference in camera quality might not be worth the extra money. But to give you an idea of what each camera can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the A24 4G. So in general, considering this is a really affordable 4G phone, I do think the photo quality here is really good for what it is. And for the average user, for typical casual daily use, I do think it will get the job done. So if you're doing something like, I don't know, maybe taking the occasional Instagram photo every now and then, taking vacation photos for your own memories, sending things to friends and family, stuff like that that's not really super professional or serious, in that kind of situation, the A24 4G is really all you're actually going to need. So if you are more of an average user, you probably don't have to spend a bunch of money on a much higher end device. And then here's some pictures taken with the S21 FE, and you can probably tell the S21 FE does take significantly better photos, since after all it is technically a flagship phone, so definitely keep this in mind. But again, in most situations, it's probably not worth a bunch of extra money. Now again, if you're in a place like the US for example, where the S21 FE is honestly really cheap for what it is, then you might want to just get the S21 FE anyway, because who doesn't want better photo quality? But at the same time, if you are in a region where the A24 4G is a lot less expensive, then I feel like for most people, the A24 4G will be perfectly fine. But if you do want that extra photo quality and it's worth it to you, the S21 FE will have an advantage. Now for the RAM and processor, with the A24 4G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G99 processor. With the S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So probably the most obvious difference here is that with the S21 FE, this is a 5G phone, whereas clearly the A24 4G is not a 5G phone. So if you do want 5G connectivity, then obviously you probably won't even be considering the A24 4G. But aside from that, when it comes to performance, the S21 FE will be quite a bit faster. But that being said, I feel like for what it is, the A24 4G is actually surprisingly fast itself. To put this into perspective, compared to a lot of entry-level 5G phones, I have actually found the A24 to be just as fast, if not faster than a lot of them. So yeah, the performance we're getting here is definitely impressive. And for basic activities like web browsing, social media, watching videos, listening to music, and even some mobile gaming, the A24 will definitely get the job done. But if you're really going to be on your phone a lot doing more demanding activities, the S21 FE will still have a significant advantage. Now I ran a benchmark test on both phones here using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, clearly here, the S21 FE is significantly faster, which you were probably expecting anyway, but honestly for what it is, the A24 4G is really not that far behind. I mean, based on just these scores, this is about the level of like the Samsung Galaxy A53 5G, which really was not a slow phone either. So in general, if you're really only doing average basic activities, again, aside from not having 5G connectivity, I do think the A24 4G will be perfectly fine. But if you do want a really fast phone and you really are going to be on it a lot, the S21 FE will still be a better choice. Now for the batteries, the A24 4G actually has a slight advantage here with a 5000 mAh battery versus the S21 FE at 4500. So not really the biggest difference, but with the A24 the battery life will be a bit better, and then down the road as the batteries degrade, which all batteries do, the A24 will last a tiny bit longer too. So if the battery is really a priority for you, the A24 will be a pretty good choice, but also keep in mind in my experience, at least with the Snapdragon version, the S21 FE has pretty decent battery life too. Now it's nothing exceptional, but it does get the job done for most situations, so I can't really complain too much. Also keep in mind when it comes to charging, both phones do support 25 watt fast charging, which is pretty good, but the S21 FE also does have wireless charging, whereas the A24 doesn't. So if you do want wireless charging, definitely keep this in mind, but otherwise, the charging features are really not that much different. For the software, both phones have Android 13, and considering Samsung has really good software support, with either phone, you can also expect to get several other major updates in the future. But with the A24 being a year newer, this phone is going to get Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, whereas with the S21 FE, this phone will only get 14, 15, and 16. Now, honestly, I feel like this isn't really a huge difference, considering it's like one update slash 1 year, so if you're going to keep your phone for like 3 more years, then the A24 will have an advantage, but if you're someone who likes to get a phone maybe every year or so, the S21 FE will still be perfectly fine. And then for other features, also keep in mind, both phones here do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you won't have to worry about that, but unfortunately the S21 FE does not have a headphone jack, whereas the A24 4G does. So if you do like to use wired headphones without an adapter, definitely keep this in mind. But in conclusion, which of these phones makes the most sense for you? Now, this really depends on a lot of things. First of all, if you're really just looking for a basic phone, you don't really need 5G connectivity or really that many fancy features, and you really just want something that has a good display for consuming content, decent performance, a nice camera, a large battery, and features like NFC, then in general, the A24 4G will get the job done just fine. But if you do want something a bit higher end that has really fast performance, a flagship level camera, features like wireless charging, and just a more premium device in general, the S21 FE might be worth it to you. But that being said, another thing to keep in mind is, again, with the S21 FE, the price can vary a lot. I know that in some countries it's still going for pretty much the full price, which for the average user in a lot of situations, if this phone is going for the full $600 or $700, most people are probably going to be perfectly fine with the A24 anyway. But again, in the US, the S21 FE is definitely a lot more affordable than it once was. And again, once the S23 FE comes out in a couple months now, it's probably going to be even cheaper. So honestly, in that kind of situation, if you are in the US, I would definitely go with the S21 FE, because with the A24 4G, this phone is not officially launched in the US, so you can't get it through any carriers. So you will have to get it factory unlocked, which in that case, it's going for around $185, and for probably not that much more, you can easily get an S21 FE. So yeah, in the US, I would definitely keep this in mind, but if you're outside the US in an area where the S21 FE is a lot more expensive, then unless you are really looking for a more premium flagship device, for most people, I do think the A24 4G will still be perfectly fine. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.